Number 1, the time to effort to profit ratio. The time and effort involved in selling a $2 card for a $1 profit is about the same as selling a $1,000 card for a $100 profit. Even though in that first example, the margin is a lot better. So if you're thinking about selling Pokemon cards, you kind of have to ask yourself, what's your time worth to you? Would you trade 1 hour of your life listing and selling and packaging a handful of items that make you $10 of profit? Maybe that's worth it to you. Maybe that's a really good hourly rate for you. I was doing this at the beginning though, and that just didn't feel like a good use of my time. Because of that, I reduced my exposure to lower end cards. I just buy fewer of them than I used to. I also, if I do buy them at a lower percentage off of market to increase my margin, just to make it a little bit more worth it. Buying almost anything in Pokemon at 75%, if you're able to sell it at market, is pretty good. 25% margin is quite good by Pokemon selling standards, but 75% of a $5 item is $4. So if you manage to sell it at market, you make $1 for that transaction at the end of it. But 85% of a $1,000 item is $850. Even if I don't sell that at market, let's say I sell it at $950, I still make $100, and it's pretty much the same amount of effort. It's just a much higher level of risk. For me, I ended up deciding that it was better as I got more comfortable to take on that additional risk and focus on higher end items, even if the margins are a little bit lower, because I'd way rather make $100 or $150 at 15% margin for a single transaction, as opposed to making $1 off of a $2 card in that same transaction. At the end of the day, even though it might be a 10% or 15% margin versus a 25 to 50% margin, it ends up taking a kind of similar amount of time to source. Maybe if you're selling online, to take photos, list, sell, package, takes a similar amount of time and effort. So for me, I just decided I wanted to optimize the minutes it took, and that meant I moved away from lower end, higher volume selling, which you can still do. And you might be watching this thinking, well, I know so-and-so makes $200K a year selling bulk cards. Totally. But they probably sell like 500,000 bulk cards for $1 or $2 a piece at 50 to 75% margin. There aren't even enough hours in a year if you worked literally 24/7 to list and package, because each of those, maybe takes a minute to list up a card and a minute to package a card, even if you're very, very efficient, because it does take me way more time than that. Even if you're very efficient and you could do both of those things in a minute, 500,000 minutes is like 2 years. So even if you could do that, realistically, to pull that off, you have to hire a team of like 4 people. So you're not making $100,000. If you're paying 4 people, maybe you could take $50,000 home. And for many people, that's a good living in Pokemon cards. So that might still be intriguing for you. I'm not trying to knock selling bulk or lower end cards at really, really high volumes. A lot of people do an amazing job of that. But for me, I work a full-time job. I have a wife, I have dogs, I have other hobbies outside of this, and this is really, at the end of the day, just a hobby for me that I get a lot of joy out of. Selling hundreds of thousands of individual items for relatively small profit over any period of time just didn't make sense for me. So I kind of had to figure that out for myself and learn that the hard way, that time to effort to profit ratio, there's some real thinking and kind of decision making you need to do there. Number 2, grading cards is very leveraged, but there are no shortcuts. I've actually shared the exact numbers behind my own grading on this channel in multiple other videos, so you can definitely go check those out if you're really interested in card grading. But the point is, I've at this point turned about $9,000 of cards and grading fees into about $30,000 of market value. So more than tripled my money, and my gem rate, or the rate at which I get a PSA 10 when I send cards into PSA, when I think I'm gonna get a 10, about 80% of the time I've been able to guess that correctly. So then naturally when people hear numbers like that, they ask, okay, obviously grading sounds efficient, it makes sense. Where do I find gradable cards? Well, why don't I give you 5 guesses? I'll wait. Just rattle them off. Talk to your phone, your TV screen, wherever you're watching this. Where do you think 5 places that you might find gradable cards? You're probably right. That's probably exactly how I find gradable cards. I rifle through singles at card shows. I occasionally open packs, and sometimes the stuff I get from those packs are high quality. I buy entire lots and collections, and usually some of those things will be good enough to grade. I take in cards when I'm vending at card shows, and occasionally some of those will be good enough to grade. And your 5th guess might have been buying at card shops or online on places like eBay or TCG Player, or even like Facebook groups. And that can work. And there was a time when, particularly for like Facebook groups and Reddit, I was having some success. I've graded some good cards that I've found on Facebook groups just buying from random people. But again, kind of similar to the first point, the time to effort to profit ratio for those methods, I just think it's a lower percentage. Just buying cards blindly on TCG Player is probably not a very good strategy for finding 10 candidates. So I don't personally do that one, but it can work. But honestly, that's it. I don't DM people asking to buy their grading piles. I don't go to card shows, walk up to vendors and say what on your table is gradable. No knock if you do, but I don't. And funny enough, for the first time ever in the year since I got back into this pretty heavy, I did actually go to a card show yesterday and have a vendor give me 5 or 6 cards from a grading pile that they had set aside for themselves, but they hadn't sent them in yet because PSA's turnaround time right now is really, really slow. But this is unusual, right? This is a vendor I've been working with for a year. I have a relationship with this guy. I walked up to his table, I was looking at some cards. He asked if I was looking for gradable cards. I said, yeah, that's part of what I'm doing here. And he pulled a few out and he's like, I don't have a huge shipment to send and I haven't sent these because I've been hearing the turnaround times are really slow. And I said, I will give you 95% of market. So it was still only 5 or 6 cards. And that was the closest thing to a shortcut pretty much that I've ever run into. I'm sure other people have other ways of doing this. I'm not a really high volume grader. There are people out there who are doing so much more of this than I am, and they probably have other tips and tricks they could give you. But yeah, at the end of the day, like, can you get good at grading cards and double or triple your money by doing that? Totally, I've done it. But it actually does take kind of a lot of time, a lot of risk, some luck for sure, a good amount of knowledge. So if you're gonna sell Pokemon cards and you care about those margins, I would recommend you look into grading cards. But there's a reason that a vast majority of people that are interacting with the hobby do not ever bother or do very, very little card grading. It's hard, it's time consuming, it's risky. It's not that fun for most people. For every 2 people that reach out to me and say that they sent in a small shipment and they had a really high 10 rate and a lot of it was from stuff they learned in my videos, for every 2 messages I get like that, I get one where someone messages me and they're like, got a 40% 10 rate. I think I'm gonna retire from grading. Yeah, it's hard, it's risky, it's not for everybody, but it is very leveraged. Just know that there aren't that many shortcuts. Again, I get asked all the time, what cards should I buy? Where do I find gradable cards? Again, most likely, whatever ways you can think of to find gradable cards, it's probably the exact same thing I can think of and am doing as well. Number 3, you are guaranteed to take L's. Let me just read a few numbers for you. Negative $15.19, negative $4.21, negative $97, negative $2.58, 42 cents, 22 cents, $25.58. These are real losses from the first few months that I started selling Pokemon cards again. It has worked out on the whole, but especially at the beginning, 10-ish% of any decision I made was going to result in a loss of time and money. Fortunately for me, I started slow. I was relatively risk averse in the way that I got this going at the beginning. I didn't actually take any massive L's. I didn't get scammed or robbed or make a huge bet that completely flopped or anything like that. But it still always stings to spend time sourcing, negotiating, buying, listing, negotiating again to sell, then selling it, and in many cases shipping it, all to make negative $5. That still stings. I'll give you an example of a bet I placed recently that didn't really pan out. I recently bought 5 copies of the PSA 10 Terrassel Festival Umbreon. This is when we were starting to hear that Prismatic Evolutions, the English version of the set, was gonna be really scarce and that the hit rates were really bad. I figured people are still gonna want this card and that they would turn to the Japanese version when they couldn't get the English version because it was gonna be scarce and therefore it was gonna be really expensive. Well, I think ultimately, the Japanese Terrestrial boxes were pretty available and they are guaranteed hits. So I think the Umbreon was also relatively available and the quality control in Japanese is pretty good. So the 10 rate was pretty good. So there was a point where these Umbreons were climbing from like 600 to 700 really quickly, almost literally overnight. So I don't want to say I FOMO'd in, but I was like, okay, it was way more likely to double than to cut in half. So I thought, let's just buy a few of these. I go on Sneaker Dunk, I buy 5 of them, average cost about $688 landed to me. And right now, the PSA 10 Umbreon from Terrestrial Festival is worth about $500. So I turned $3,500 into $2,500. And I haven't sold them, so I haven't necessarily technically taken the loss, but like, come on, we know like for now, I've taken a $1,000 loss and I've tied up $3,500 of my own money. I took a bigger swing, it was a slightly bigger miss. So bottom line here, you will make mistakes, you will guess wrong, you will experiment with things that don't pan out. That's all part of the journey. Don't take bigger steps than you're ready for. If you find a big vintage lot on OfferUp, but you don't know how to authenticate vintage or how to condition check and price vintage, you're not ready for that purchase. Don't even think about going and meeting up with a stranger to buy a binder of childhood collection cards if you don't know what you're looking at and you don't know how to avoid the risks that come with something like that. But you can minimize those L's that you will take, and you will take them. You can minimize them by starting slow and building up your knowledge a lot first. Number 4, trading as a card show vendor is extremely leveraged. The math behind trading is really interesting and not actually that obvious. I really did not fully appreciate it until I was preparing to vend at my first card show. So I had attended as a buyer dozens probably by that point of card shows, didn't realize just how trading worked in the vendor's favor, even when the vendor's giving the buyer a completely fair percentage on their cards. So when I was first vending, I was really interested in selling cards because it's guaranteed liquidity. You lock in the profit, you avoid loss if the card goes down in value. But let me give you an example of how trading math works. Say you're vending a card show. Someone comes to your table. They've got a $100 card that they want to sell. You offer them 80% of market, which is really, really fair, and they're happy to take that. So you paid $80 for a $100 card, you put a $100 sticker on it, you put it out on your table. Everyone wins, right? You have a pretty comfortable 10 to 20% margin once you eventually sell that card, and your customer essentially took no risk. They didn't ship it and lose it. They didn't get it damaged in any way. They didn't meet someone random in a dark alleyway. They didn't have to spend any time making an eBay listing. They just got to offload it right there and get cash in hand. Everybody wins. Then someone comes up to your table and they've got a $125 card and they want to trade that toward the $100 card you just bought for $80. You say, great, I trade around 80%. 80% of 125 is 100. We could just do a straight trade there. And they do it. Again, everybody wins. You just got to kind of upgrade the value of that card, and the person that just came to your table didn't spend any money to acquire something that they wanted more. So you put a $125 sticker on that new card and you put it out on your table. And someone walks up again and they have a $150 card and they want to trade it toward that $125 card you just got. Well, it's not quite 80%, but you're just a chill guy. You just want to make deals. You're not a greed monster. And so you take 84% on the trade. Totally fine. You do a straight trade there. You value your card at 120 bucks. It's 84%, whatever. You now have a $150 card at your table. And the cost you put into it was just the original $80 you spent on that $100 card at the beginning of the show. So with just a few buys and trades, you essentially double your money. You turned $80 into $150 of value. Now you can imagine how this compounds, right? As you do more and more trades, it's not impossible to make the effective cost in a card pretty much go towards zero. And it especially works out if you pair this with other strategies. I'll give you an example from a recent show that I was just vending at. I had a pair of slabs valued at $500. I graded them myself. I bought the cards raw and sent them into grade. My cost for the cards plus the grading fees was about $100. So that was a pretty huge upside for me. Someone came to my table and they wanted to trade a bunch of high quality, modern raw singles toward those two slabs. I traded about 80%, so it was $625 of singles for my $500 of slabs, and we made a trade that involved no cash. That means now my cost for those $625 of singles is just the $100 I spent on the cards and the grading fees to get those two slabs. Let's say I put those cards out at my table, someone comes up and buys $100 of cards from that lot. So now I've covered my costs, I've taken back in the cash that I spent on the original slabs that I graded, but now I have $525 worth of singles from that trade, and I haven't risked anything. They are essentially free to me. So grading can be high value, but so can trading, and trading is easier to do than grading if you're vending at a card show. So trading, especially if you're doing it as a vendor at high percentages so that it's fair to the buyer, it's a win-win proposition. A relatively small percentage in the vendor's favor really can snowball, and it is one of the bigger advantages of vending at card shows if that's something that's available to you and it's something you're interested in doing. Number 5, nothing increases your efficiency more than building a network or following, or realistically both. Now, just to be clear up front on this point, I know tons of people that are having a lot of success buying and selling and trading Pokemon cards, and they have zero content, but typically they do a great job on the network side. And I'll tell you more about that in a second. Just to give you some of the hard truths here. If a buyer for a card you have for sale doesn't know you exist and can't find you, or they don't trust you when they do find you, they're not buying your copy of that card. And if someone wants to, let's say, sell their collection, and you're not one of the first 5 names or stores or places that come to mind for them, you're also not gonna have access to buying that collection. When I first started getting back into Pokemon and posting videos, I had no idea where it was all gonna go. I just was having a good time, and I am just having a good time. But when I first started growing that collection and getting nervous about how much it cost, and then wanting to do a little bit of selling to help offset the growth of my collection, that process really was a grind. I was going to card shows, I was on Facebook groups and Reddit and eBay, sourcing cards and buying things and taking risks and buying bad things at as low of a percentage as I could get, but like not very desirable stuff a lot of the time. And then most of the time I would flip those things on eBay, which those types of platforms typically take 13 to 16% as a fee after shipping and taxes and all that. So it was quite a bit of work for not a ton of return, but this was an important part of my journey. This was how I built experience, this is how I learned, this is how I built a reputation and credibility, right? Hundreds of positive transactions I can point to so that when I go to make bigger transactions or transactions that are a little riskier to the other person on the other side, I can say, hey, look, I've done hundreds of these transactions on eBay and wherever else, and like, you can trust me, I'm not gonna throw that reputation away for this one deal. And as I got to that point of hundreds of positive eBay transactions and in-person transactions and things like that, my YouTube channel, where I was posting videos about Pokemon cards, also started growing. And it got to the point around that time where people would come to me directly to buy things or to sell things, and I could start posting cards on Instagram and people would buy them through Instagram. Anyway, fast forward to today, I actually spend a lot less time and effort sourcing and selling cards than I did at the beginning of this process. And a lot of that does just have to do with the fact that I have built a network of people through Instagram and social media and at my local card show scene. So I have access to buying and selling things, sometimes at favorable prices, but also by building a following through the content and building trust and value through the content through hundreds of successful transactions. There are a lot of days where I open my Instagram DMs and someone reached out to me. It happened today. Someone reached out to me and said, I've got $5,000 of my personal collection that I want to sell, and I'll probably end up buying it. It's by no means a requirement to really like invest in social media or content. It's not for everybody. And again, I know people who are doing really, really well with this buying and selling and trading cards thing with very, very small Instagram followings and zero content posted. But in most cases, they're doing well for themselves in large part because they've spent so much effort in cultivating a real network. And in that sense, they do have a following. There are, maybe 100 people in their local card show scene that prefer to go to them first when they want to buy or sell something. And that's a great way to have the same effect without like having to have a YouTube channel or something like that. And honestly, if you don't do either of these things, you don't want to build a network and you don't want to build a following, you can still totally buy and sell cards. You could do this completely silently, facelessly from your bedroom on TCG Player and eBay and things like that. But just know, again, I'm talking about efficiency here. It will probably stay a grind sourcing and selling cards for a pretty long time, maybe indefinitely. And just again, building connections. And if you can, building a following through high quality content and building trust that way, it will improve your efficiency. If it's something that you can invest in, you should. And number 6, if you only try to copy other people, you're always gonna be a step behind. Another hard truth here, if you're relying on anyone else to tell you what to buy or when to buy it, you'll never build the muscle of finding opportunities for yourself. And I would say this is at least doubly true if 100% of your advice or ideas come from content creators. There are a lot of amazing content creators on places like YouTube that are truly giving out great advice completely for free and asking nothing in return. So it's normal and recommended to take inspiration and ideas from people like that who have done more of it for longer than you have. But if you never have your own angle, your own take, or try to have your own learnings or generate your own ideas, it's gonna be really hard to stand out or get ahead. Just to give you an example, when I first got started and I was trying to figure out grading plays, right? I had no idea how to kind of identify what cards should I buy to grade that have like a good upside if I hit a 10. I was watching videos from people like Jarchomp and Collectibles where they make a video and they say, here's 10 illustration rares with like really, really huge upside if you hit a 10. But guess what? Jarchomp is already doing that play himself. He's probably told his buddies about it. Then he made a video and 20,000 people saw it. So now you know the information, but so do like tens of thousands of other people. So is the advice still valid? Yeah, of course it's still valid. But did it also probably just get way harder to find a great copy of these particular cards to grade? Yeah, it probably did. A lot of other people are just doing the same thing now and you're just 10,000th in line for this idea. And if they have success and they start grading those cards, does that potentially flood the market, increase the supply, and actually decrease the premium for the PSA 10 for those cards? Also, probably yes. So again, if you find creators that you trust, or you find people in the hobby that are kind of mentors or connections for you and you trust their advice, it's a great idea to take other people's advice. That's literally what I'm doing in this video. If you made it this far in this video, I hope you take the advice. These are things that I learned the hard way that hopefully now you can avoid, right? But again, if you only rely on carbon copying other people's ideas and opinions, you're always gonna be behind. There it is, 6 of the least obvious things that I learned selling over $100,000 of Pokemon cards in under a year. These are things I learned the hard way, so hopefully now you don't have to, and you can go out there and make brand new mistakes. The whole reason I got into selling cards in the first place was just to fund my growing personal collection, because this hobby can get really expensive. And recently, I actually hit my goal of making enough profit through the hobby to fund the hobby itself. My 5-figure Pokemon collection cost me, now that I bought a few more things, probably a few $1,000s, but a lot less than I spent on it. I break down the entire journey step by step in this video, so I'll see you there.